Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this week's Industry Insights. Today, we are going to be talking all things AI, so please bring your questions. I know this is definitely one of those cutting-edge, buzzworthy topics, but there's also a lot of things to demystify, a lot of ways to try to make this more practical rather than aspirational. So we're really excited to chat with you guys today about some of these use cases and where we see AI fitting into the data protection landscape. But before we do that, I'd really love to hear from you all where you're tuning in from. Wherever you're tuning in, whether it's LinkedIn, X, Facebook, let us know in the chat where you're calling in from. Today, we're going to be showing a map so that we can see where everybody's joining us from and, just show kind of the global reach of this show. So thank you all so much for joining us. And speaking of joining us from all around the world, I have a very special guest on today's show, a good friend of mine for many, many years, Mr. Anthony Spiteri.
Hey, Leah, how you doing? Great to be on Industry Insights, and hopefully we're getting lots of people from all around the world, not just little old Australia here.
Absolutely. And it's very late for you in Australia, so thank you so much for joining us. It is currently noon on the East Coast of the United States, so I am awake. I've had plenty of caffeine. You, however, my friend, might need a little bit of pick-me-up during the show, but I think we will get lots of good discussion, so it'll keep you awake.
Awesome stuff. Let's get into it.
Definitely. Let's get into it. So we wanted to start things off with just kind of a preamble of talking about why AI is such an important topic. Obviously, we know that it is, top of mind for a lot of thought leaders in the space, and there's a lot of trend analysis and hype cycles going on, but we wanted to really bring it down to earth of the kind of core principles of why AI is so exciting in a lot of different categories of tech, but certainly in the data protection space. And again, it's all about unlocking the underlying value of data. Veeam, of course, talks about data all day long. We are the data resilience company, of course, but I think that there's more to it than just the resilience of data. It's really extracting as much value as you possibly can, especially when controlling data, managing data, storing data is so expensive. So why don't you share some of those initial thoughts with us?
Yeah, I mean, look, data is at the center of this world. We know that. We've been told this for a long time, What's really interesting about this particular, I guess, hype cycle is technology that's advancing like every day in terms of generative AI and typically AI and ML in a sense is that where we were maybe 5 years ago when Leah, when we were talking about activation of data, what do we do with the backup data that's sitting there? And from a backup company perspective like Veeam, we control all this data, right? We control on behalf of our customers, the customers own that. But then it's like siloed data from different platforms, different systems are coming in and being backed up. And typically that data just sits there and does nothing until it's needed in case of a disaster, right? That's the preamble for why data protection exists. And fair enough as well. We all know there's lots of nasties going on, and actually we'll tie that into AI a little bit later on. But what if you had the capability to take that data and then basically surface it with the technology that that is in existence with the Veeam data platform, our Veeam data API, which we launched 5 years ago as an example, but even just our instant recovery technologies. What if you're able to take all that siloed data, mount it, and then use the modern day tooling of AI to get some more insights out of that data, make it work for you? All of a sudden, it's not just used for the what if, but it's used from a positive way, and you get so much efficiencies out of that data at the same time.
Definitely. And I think that's what's really exciting about so much of this is those efficiencies that we can try to identify. And again, I mentioned that we really, with this show, want to try to make this a lot more of a practical approach. Again, I think AI can sound very hype cycle-y, but we're really excited to make this much more practical. And to do that, Anthony and I kind of talked about a couple of core use cases of where we think AI and data protection can fit in. So we're really excited to outline some of those for you. I think the first one that we really wanted to talk about was probably the primary use case for AI, which is what I've lovingly referred to as doing backup better. And I think when we're thinking about how you can, enable teams better at scale. Certainly as you're looking at pulling more workloads into your sphere of protection, there's just a lot of knowledge gaps, right? There's a lot of areas where people need to be able to connect the dots a lot better, a lot faster, and certainly with a lot less errors in the mix. And I know talking about error management is a really big part of the core Veeam story. So Anthony, in particular, when we've looked at some of the things that Veeam has been innovating on, not just in the last year, but actually in the last 5 or 6 years even.
Yeah.
I know you and I were at Tech Expo a long time ago talking about a feature that we both really love, intelligent diagnostics, which isn't technically AI. It's more on the ML side of things, but
definitely
we'll take credit for it here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But I think, there's that crossover between what traditionally was AI, ML, and what generative AI is now. But obviously from a Veeam perspective, we've been leveraging the power of taking data sets and logs and customer insights and turning it into meaningful actions. And that's what that particular feature was all about. But then you fast forward it, this whole inline malware detection that we're doing as well takes it to that next step further. But I think from Veeam's perspective, if we go back to backup efficiencies, how do you do backup better? It's really about creating efficiencies and benefits for the backup admin. So while this is still somewhat aspirational from the point of view of, we're still trying to work out how you'd place this properly in a meaningful and targeted way into the platform, we know where we want to get to. We want to get to a position where the backup admin can log in, can, tap into some generative AI capabilities, can, ask the system about some sort of resolution, ask where their backups are at. But on the flip side, actually understand that their backup platform is working for them. The power of AI and ML is built into that platform, and that is helping them be better at their job, which ultimately from a Veeam perspective, what do? We keep businesses running, right? And if we can help the backup admin do that, that's beneficial. So plugging in AI technologies into the platform is only going to be beneficial. And I think we're going to talk about some specifics in the next few bits and pieces as well.
Definitely. And one specific I did want to call out too is this idea of AI assistance, right? And we're seeing that as one of those primary use cases for AI across a lot of different categories of solutions. But specifically in the backup space, I'm sure if you're tuning in to this show, you are one of those backup admins or somebody that's a data protection leader in your organization. But there's, I'm sure, a lot of folks that you work with in your organization that maybe aren't hardcore data protection geeks like we all are. They don't necessarily know all those best practices and all of the different, things that you want to be implementing. So as you're working with different workload owners, right? Maybe you're working with your DevOps team. Maybe you're working with some app owners who need some critical recovery capabilities. Maybe you're working with your security teams who don't necessarily put hands on keyboards of a lot of different products. They're much more on the governance, risk, and compliance front. Being able to use something like an AI assistant within Veeam technology, I think is a really great way that you can see some of those AI concepts be used in even now, right? Even in the most recent version of Veeam Data Platform. And then as Anthony said, we have a much bigger plan, right, that we're executing against. This is just the first of many.
Yeah, so what we've got in 12.1 now is the first iteration of our AI assistant. And what it effectively is, it's a chatbot, as you'd expect when you talk about generative AI, and it's trained on specific Veeam help files and KB articles. But that is also extended in that if you are an admin that wants to try and interact with our APIs, create a PowerShell script, create some Python code, maybe for those DevOps people that you were talking about, making them happy, they love a bit of code, you can go in there and say, hey, give me the PowerShell for how to start a backup job. And now that you've done that, give me the Python for the same action, right? So it's pretty rudimentary. It's pretty simple in terms of what we've done, but it's that first step. It's an important first step for us to bring in. And again, what does that equal? Equals efficiency. That's going to be a topic that we're going to reiterate over the next 15, 20 minutes as well. It's just all about efficiency. So that's what that initial AI assistant's all about. It's in Veeam Backup Replication. It's baked straight in there. And we're really excited in terms of how that's going. We're going to actually talk about where that's going in the next couple of versions as well, a bit later on.
Definitely. We're really excited to kind of keep pushing those boundaries, but we can't do that without our community, right? Our community of users who will continue to really be passionate about data protection. Speaking of which, I mentioned at the top of the call that we really wanted to hear from you all where you're calling in from. So I'd love it if we could throw up that map that I mentioned and just kind of show you guys where everybody is dialing in from. We are covering the full span of the map. Thank you, Anthony, for helping us with that.
Bad.
We don't always hit the Asia place.
Yeah. Everyone's asleep over here, so it's midnight here, so it's good to see people.
We'll catch you on the recording,
Texas,
of course.
That's it. Yep. Texas is there. I know a few of those states.
You know a few of those states. That's good. We've got Ohio. That's where I'm calling in from. The Ohio State University Buckeyes is, of course, my alma mater. Texas, we've always got production out of Texas. Missouri and Oregon as well. Thank you all so much for joining us, especially Oregon. It's quite early for you. Over in Europe, we are looking at some folks joining us from the UK, from Germany, from Romania. We really appreciate you all taking the time to join
Portugal
us.
As well? We got Portugal there.
Yes, we do have Portugal as well. I was completely forgetting what the name of that country was, so thank you. Absolutely. And over in APAC as well, of course, Anthony's joining us from Australia, but we've got Iran and Saudi Arabia as well joining us. So it's really just showing how far that data protection reach can go. And again, that's what's really exciting. We are all the data protection geeks calling into a live stream like this, but we can also carry this message into our organizations to show where data protection can fit into bigger business strategies, which I think is a great segue into another core use case that we talked about, which is all about staying a step ahead of bad actors. We know that AI is dramatically informing what these bad actors are able to do within these environments. They are able to use things like ransomware as a service and other very scary functions of AI and ML and other kind of new wave capabilities. So it stands to reason then that you should be using these kinds of capabilities in order to stay one step ahead. So Anthony, I know we talked a lot about kind of inline malware detection and some of these AI-powered capabilities that we've baked into VDP 12.1 at Veeam. So do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of what we talked about there?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is that we need to think about, AI and generative AI for good and bad as well. And obviously what we've been saying for a while now is that the pointy end of the stick has got even pointier with this generative AI capabilities, because actually, it was at Veeam last year, so 2023, when I showed off an encryption tool that I built with ChatGPT. So I was able to build basically a ransomware script that went in and actually encrypted a Amazon S3 bucket, right? And that's me being a really dodgy programmer as well. I'll be the first to tell you, not a programmer. Now, back then, ChatGPT had some guardrails about saying, look, I don't think you should be doing this, but I don't think I'm going to give this to you. But I was able to coerce it. I was able to kind of prompt engineer my way for it to give me the code. All good. If you try and do that today with ChatGPT, it's going to be a lot harder to get that out. They've put a lot more guardrails out there, right? So this whole concept of responsible AI, there's lots of governments that are looking to bring this in at certain levels. If you think about what we did with data and GDPR and all that kind of regulation, I think that's an inevitability here for AI as well. What's interesting about the bad side of this is that there's actually some really interesting LLMs that exist on the dark web, and they're called some really cool names as well, like Fraud GBT, Evil GBT, Dark Barrett, Wolf GBT, and then the one that's actually got most popularity is something called Worm GBT. Basically, you pay a monthly fee, you get access to it, and it's basically unguarded, unrailed, and you can actually get it to create malware scripts, ransomware, it'll create phishing emails, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's really interesting that this is accessible to effectively anyone that's willing to get on the dark web, and it's not that hard to get on the dark web today. All you need to thaw out a Brave browser and you can get on there, pay a bit of money, and bam, you've got access to this. Now, what that means is that, the people that might have had passing interest in doing something bad with generative AI, we'll be able to do it, right? But then at the higher level, the actual professionals, the guys that actually do this as a business and have help desks and whatever, just think about what they're able to do with this accelerated technology. Now, that's the bad side of it. On the good side of it, organizations should definitely be looking at both bolstering their security mechanisms by getting their engineers, the security teams, the CISO teams to be able to get good at prompt engineering to fight that fight, right? Now, that's at that sort of organizational level. But what obviously we're seeing at a vendor level is that the vendors are getting smarter as well and putting a lot of this generative AI and just AI and ML technology into their product to help fight that. So that's a really interesting kind of component of this, Leah, which I think it's kind of exciting and scary at the same time, I think, just in terms of, as one goes ahead, the other one goes ahead a little bit further, and it's a continual race.
But that's part of where this community element is so important, because we need to be sharing these real-time insights and best practices and challenging each other. And one of the things that we find a lot is that security teams who you might work with internally in your company, they may not really be thinking about backup as something that can help them be proactive, right? They really can think of backup as this reactive, oh, we can recover the data, but I have 20 other steps between now and then to get there. And one of the things that we're really passionate about is helping the broader community, right? Again, the data protection geeks, we all know this, but the broader community understand that in 96% of ransomware attacks, the backup infrastructure is often attacked, right? And we find through our research that 76% of the time, they're somewhat successful, right, in doing that. So, but it stands to reason then that if you can monitor the activity of the backups, right? Identifying anomalous activity, you might find an early signal that helps you get ahead, right? And that's why we're so passionate about baking some of these AI and ML principles into our backup solutions, because we want to help your organization see that anomalous activity faster, alert the GRC teams faster, right? Staying one step ahead is the best kind of approach that we can have. So that's where that white hat, black hat kind of story comes in.
Yeah. And that's our inline malware detection, right? It's a fantastic feature. That's, when you put it together with a lot of our security features, we've got the threat center in play, which gives best practice, like do this, and that to make sure that if your backups are targeted, which they will be, you can protect against that. We've seen some great stories. I've heard some great stories about the bad actor getting in and effectively encrypting almost everything. But then they had Veeam and they had a hardened Linux repository that was immutable. And the threat actor thought that they ran an encryption script. They got in, they had root access, but because everything was immutable on that file system, they couldn't change the backups. It was the only thing that survived. It was the only thing that kept this business in play. Now that was, part of, our best practice. But then inline malware detection is really about letting people know what could be in their backups, what's lurking. We know that these malwares and these threats lurk sometimes. They're not going to sit there and just basically be known straight away. So in our inline malware detection, which is based on a bunch of algorithms, which effectively looks at entropy, which is a fancy way of saying, being able to encrypt data and looking at that change rate, is this likely to be something that's not supposed to be there? And then we flag it as suspicious. And we actually do that as well, Leah, with some of our great technology partners as well. So, partnering with the pros to be able to get two-way insights with our integration API as well. That's really important.
Yeah, it's definitely very important. And again, a great way that we can keep trying to extract more value from that backup function. Because we know backup can be expensive. It's a lot to store these things. So being able to pull more value out, I think, is something that we are really excited about. Speaking of which, I think that brings us nicely into our next use case, which is all about reusing the backup data. And this is something that Veeam has talked about off and on over the years. I think it was perhaps more aspirational back in the day. And now I think we're really seeing a lot of this bear fruit, this idea that you've got these backups, they are just sitting there, but these are copies of your production data. So if there are things that you want to better understand about your data or even do to your data, it stands to reason that using that backup data that you've already paid for can pay some really significant dividends. And I think we're seeing AI and ML making that an even bigger possibility, right, Anthony?
Yeah, and this is definitely more of an art of the possible at the moment, right? With the tooling that's out there. Like we said, in 2019 at Veeam, we had the data integration API, and we did a very rudimentary demo where we used that to mount a Windows file system, and then we used some specific piece of software which just looked at PCI data. Pretty easy, right? Now think about that now, where you've got all this local LLM technology. You can actually mount situations. So NVIDIA even have a sort of MVP type of product, which is called Chat RTX, that you can download, and you can actually then use the graphics card in a Windows machine to mount a file system and actually get really deep, quick insights into what lives in that file system within the files and whatnot. So the technology has moved ahead at a great pace, and we're really at a location now where, from a company perspective, having that backup data just sitting there, you can now mount that and use the technology that's out there to do something with that data. That's really exciting, right? So that's one of the benefits, I think, of Veeam, being able to, again, take that solo data, bring it into one location with a portable data format, unlock that data. We talk about data freedom. It's one of our core tendencies. This plays into that as well. Data freedom, data intelligence, it works beautifully.
Definitely. And I think that it speaks to kind of our approach to data protection all up, this idea that we bake some features into what's core to Veeam, right? We have our own AI assistant. We have our own analytics tool sets. We have our own inline malware scanning. But we also try to really make things possible in the broader context of your tech stack, right? We spend quite a bit of time as a development team making sure that there are APIs available so that other kinds of partnerships can arise. Sometimes we even build those integrations ourselves so that you get that out of the box turnkey experience of relating what Veeam can do to what others can do. So I think there's a lot more on the horizon in this front that's super exciting to mention. And I think that this is a good time, maybe, Anthony, to talk a little bit more about some of these kind of aspirational and future things. One thing that we've talked about in particular is backup of LLMs, right? As more organizations use these large language models within what they're doing as an organization, it's increasing the importance of that data. But something that I think we've learned, Anthony, is that LLMs the reliability of the LLM is very important, right? If you can't rely on it, then it kind of all falls apart where your value is. So this idea of backing up the data to make sure that it is reliable, that you can easily access it, it's kind of critical. And I think something we're really excited to see grow in the data protection space more.
Yeah, and we get asked all the time, how do you back up the LLM? How do you protect the data? And I think, if we're being honest, we're not quite there from an end-to-end approach yet. But what we do know is there's certain components that we can back up, because ultimately we're taking data from one location. Typically it's in a pipeline, it gets transformed, it ends up in another location, and then you put your models, your training data, or your weightings, the actual, then what makes up that whole platform. It's a bunch of VMs. We're seeing a lot of containerization come into play here. We're seeing vector databases. So ultimately it's all just data. We started with data. It's central to that. So what we're trying to work with customers at the moment is along that way. How do we inject Veeam to be able to protect that data, along the way? So I don't think we're going to see in the short term a Veeam backup for generative AI or a Veeam backup for LLMs, right? That's not what it's about. But certainly where there's data and where it's exposed on a platform, we can protect it. And so we've got to be part of that thought process, because, like we said, the data is so critical. And then if you're spending time, you're spending energy creating it, you want to protect it and make sure that it's not compromised, or it doesn't get encrypted, or there's no fat fingering as well. So it's an important process. But again, we're just at the start of understanding about what needs to be done there.
Definitely. And speaking of things we're just at the start at, it really is all about, at the end of the day, pulling those insights out of this data, right? Making sure that your business can be better, faster, stronger, be better informed about the decisions that your groups need to be able to make. And that's, I think, where we're really excited to watch this head. So Anthony, I know something that we wanted to kind of educate the community on a little bit is one of these core concepts all about RAG. So do you want to
RAG, that's
explain to
right.
everybody what RAG
Yeah,
is?
let's do this. Let's do RAG in a couple of minutes, right? Because I know we're running short on time. And let's talk about this in the context of our next iteration of the AI assistant, where we're plugging this into Veeam 1. Okay. And what we're doing, as I showed on stage at VeeamON 2024, we're actually talking to the Veeam 1 APIs to be able to get meaningful data, live data, and put that through a model to get better contextual awareness of an answer, right? So the engineer or the C-suite can access backup data, ask a question, and get information that's almost live. And how we do that is through a RAG, or a retrieval augmented generation. And what we're doing here is, as the user inputs a prompt, so asks a question to the chatbot, it then goes into an agent. The agent looks at keywords and key points as part of that prompt. From there, it knows that if it's triggered, say we're looking up the threat center as an example. So give me my threat score. It's going to see that as a keyword. What it's going to do then, it's going to go and call the Veeam APIs in this case. In this case, it's Veeam 1 APIs. It's going to get the data from the system that's live. It's going to put it into some sort of database, a vector database, and it's going to store that. And then it's going to use that data as part of its answer. Now, then, obviously, what we're doing there is we're augmenting. That's where the augmenting comes in, the generation. So the model knows about what it's been programmed on holistically from when you first get it, whether it's a local model, whether it's ChatGPT. What we're doing is we're inserting more data to give it more contextual awareness. And so the result is, when it answers, it's answering from what it knows plus what data is coming in. So that efficiency is just up-leveled at the same time. And then what it does, it keeps that contextual data in the database, and it keeps on building and building. So the next question that you ask it, it should know about some bits of the previous answer. So it gets smarter in that session. So it's really exciting in terms of what we're doing with Veeam 1 moving forward. And I'm super excited with that being released, because I think it's just going to take the Veeam AI assistant, what we've done in 12.1, and just take it to the next level and really start to make it useful for business. Because again, as a business, as an outcome, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to achieve efficiencies. This is absolutely doing that. It's getting to the meat and potatoes really quick.
Definitely. And I think that that's what's really exciting to empower you all as our data protection community with, is these kinds of insights that you can take back to different organizations within your company, whether it be governance, risk, and compliance teams, whether that be your IT leadership, or even line of business owners. Being able to empower you all with that story told through data, I think, is going to be something that we continue to focus on as an organization. I wanted to take one more minute to just talk about the map for a second. A lot more people have let us know where they're calling in from, so we'll throw that map up one more time. Thank you all again for joining us. We know that summer can be a time where you want to get outside, spend time with your families, so getting to spend a little bit of time with you all is such a pleasure. So for those who let us know that they're calling in from Delaware, Tennessee, Puerto Rico, thank you so much for joining us. And then if we flip over onto the map further, we have some other countries in the mix. The Netherlands and Slovenia have called in. I have lots of Dutch family members, so thank you all so much for joining us from the Netherlands. And then if we want to flip the map again, just showing some folks in South America, Brazil, thank you. And then over in APAC as well, we had India and Pakistan. So wow, we've really lit up this map today across all the different platforms that you guys are calling in from. We really appreciate you guys joining us and being on this adventure with us, because with one final thing to wrap with, we just wanted to talk a bit about, again, some of those future commitments that we have in that AI space, and in particular highlight our partnership with Microsoft. We have announced a partnership with Microsoft, an intent to co-develop, and it's based on their AI stack, if you will. Microsoft is looking to continue to make a lot of functions of AI available through not only their own OpenAI tool sets, but also across Microsoft Azure. So really taking a look at how we can crack open those backups, right? Help folks use something like Copilot to be able to derive those data insights. A lot of what we just talked about with that last use case, we are really excited to keep developing with Microsoft. Anthony, any words on the Microsoft partnership?
Yeah, I think the key part there is the development there is for the Veeam Data Cloud, right? So what we were talking about before was for the Veeam Data Platform, the original stack there. Being able to take that and implement the same theory, but onto M365 backup data is actually pretty powerful because, again, a lot of people use M365, SharePoint, OneDrive as storage, and email is critical. And you can derive a lot of insights out of that. So being able, but also as well, it's an attack vector, right? It's a place where bad malicious actors are going to try and infiltrate and create havoc. So if we can find, again, a smart way to have a LLM or the Copilot look over a particular mailbox and say, hey, there's been a huge rate of change here. You might want to check it out, and then being able to tap into that and get more context around what's going on. That's pretty powerful. So yeah, we're really looking forward to that. There's obviously a great deal of benefit in having that on the Veeam Data Cloud with the M365 data protection there as well. So really looking forward to that coming out later on at the same time, along with what we've got in the Veeam Data Platform.
Awesome. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to chat more about this AI piece with you, and also to keep talking about Veeam Data Cloud. So that actually was a perfect segue into Thursday's Tech Bytes episode, where the Veeam team is going to be talking all about the Microsoft backup service and how Veeam Data Cloud is here to really leverage that service and those core capabilities to keep Microsoft 365 data protected. So be sure to join the Veeam team on Tuesday, and we will be back with industry insights next week. Thank you all so much for joining us again, and we look forward to connecting soon.
Thank you.